few things. I'm trying to keep it so that people don't, like I'm not picking on anybody. Thanks. Still trying to get dressed here. And, you know, comedians say, you know, when you start laughing, you're really laughing at yourself. But if you start getting mad, you might just think for a minute, maybe you're just getting mad at yourself first. And then if you're really concerned about it, I'll be around. Really comes up with an educational beatdown. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this, the differences. I grew up in a lot of different places, but when I was going through college and after I got out of college, I was working on cow-calf ranches in Colorado. I worked on 4 or 5 of them, got around a little bit. This was one herd that I worked with. This is down Four Corners. We ran, I worked for him. He was a pretty famous person. They made a movie out of him and stuff. And remember how they used to have advertisements in Field and Stream and stuff for cigarettes? Well, I was looking through a Field and Stream one time in the Marlboro commercial. I said, boy, that looks familiar. It was the corral I used to have down there and stuff, and the horses were my horses I rode. We ran about 600 head of beef, mothers. We had 50 bulls to keep them happy, 200 yearlings, and I had somewhere between 250 to 300 square miles of range to cover. I did want to go someplace. And so we had a little bit of time on your hand when you're pushing cows from one place to another. We also drove to the winter range, was down in Four Corners area on the desert. We weren't on the floor, we were still up in the canyons. It's about 4,500 feet. And then we had a 6-day cattle drive up into the high country, and I spent the summers up there between 9,000 and 10,000 feet. So people say, boy, that must have been a really romantic lifestyle. I said, yeah, for the first 15 minutes every morning. We had a lot of time to think, so we did. And there's a saying that comes out called Sagebrush Philosophy. This is, you know, that's basically you can think about the theory of relativity and all kinds of things while you're pushing cattle. So there's actually some pretty intelligent people that did that, you know. So anyway, typical conversation when you're there, because you had a lot of distance to cover. You're always asking people, you know, what's it like up there? How's the pasture? How much poison? We had larkspur every spring, which you had to let it die out before you put your cattle up there. The grass was fine. It was just the poison was so bad. You had to wait until the forbs died down, then you graze up. So conversation was always about what's coming up next, what are you doing? With that, when the seasons change, the conversation changed. You go to a cafe, you go someplace, and they talk about, you know, how's your calf crop? You know, what's going on? You doing good? Are your cattle getting fat? That type of thing. Then one day I moved, you know, and I moved somewhere else, and people were different. You know, I didn't know this. I've been around a lot of places, and one of the first things, I moved to another state. I was there, and they had this extension agent was talking about crops, and it had a group like this, you know, not real big, and they says, well, how many of you planting corn? Nobody raised their hand. How many people planting wheat? Nobody raised their hand. Beans? Nobody. Finally he says, how many of you planted anything this year? Nobody. And I was like, wow, nobody talks to each other. You know, within a month, if you plant 160 acres of corn, your neighbor's going to know it. And so it got to see it. And I started thinking about this. And so I came up with this, and I've been thinking about this for years and years. The difference between where you're heading and where you're from. And it comes down to a lot of things. And I got a herding background, and it's different than farming. You don't see it, but I can, because I'm always on the move and stuff, and I really enjoy being a herder. So anyway, I started to notice these people wouldn't even talk to themselves. They wouldn't like share ideas and stuff. And so this is what Ed said, well, you need to talk to people about this. I said, are you sure? And so I got this place, same cows, everything, but you're not from around here. I said, yeah, well, you know what? Realize when you're a cowboy, this is something. Everybody's got sayings. You got your own slang. You know, rosin jaws, day workers, that type of thing. You know, that's towards the bottom. And then if you're a good hand, that means you've worked a few places you could handle. You know how to ride. You know how to rope. You know what, you know, read brands. You know a bunch about cattle. To be a top hand, folks, you got to leave the country and come back, or you have to be somewhere. You do not get to be a top hand cowboy unless you have gone several places. You know, and here I moved to this place that, no, I mean, we don't leave here. I was like, well, how do you know? How do you get any experience? How do you know anything? And this got to me because I really don't know where I'm from. You know, and I grew up in Pennsylvania. I moved to Colorado. I punched cows for 15 years or so. And then I moved to Washington. I've been to Texas, been to Alaska, worked in Canada for a little bit. And actually, my folks are moving from Oklahoma to Pennsylvania, and I was born in Maryland, so I don't even know where the heck I'm from, you know, so I didn't know how to answer that question, but they didn't worry. You know, people would say, how are you today? Where are you from? And county administrators, board of supervisors, so a lot of district directors, everything quit. Nobody would say anything after. And I thought they were just like, no. But anyway, just if you weren't from there, they didn't talk to you. And they didn't want to know. And that kind of bugged me after a little bit. So I went to Mongolia. I wanted to be around herders, you know. I mean, what my lifestyle in Colorado, I worked with old timers. They died on. Most of the people worked in the oil fields and stuff like that. And then so I went over there to be with herders. I wanted to learn what they were doing. And nobody even asked. I went there for 3 weeks. I've been there twice. I went for 3 weeks. So I came home. I didn't tell them anything. These folks have been grazing cattle for 1,000 years. They run 4 classes of livestock. They run sheep and goats. They run cows and yaks, horses, and camels. Somehow that gets out to be 5, but they say 4. They got it figured out. I mean, people say, you know, have you ever done, like you were saying, that, you know, multi-species grazing? Has anybody done it? So yeah, these guys have been doing it for 1,000 years, folks. And there's a whole issue, the difference between grazing with and grazing alongside. Some livestock will graze with each other. Their herds, I'm getting a little bit off subject, their herds, they might have 1,000 head of livestock. They drive them as a herd. There's not a fence in Mongolia. They drive them as a herd. All the camels are in one section of the herd. All the horses are in another section. Goats and sheep will run together. Cattle and yaks, they're both bovine, so they'll run together within the herd. So there's a difference, you know. You won't find that if you never leave the county. So this was a great story, and I got to leave out all the names because it's true. The guy asked me, and I'm backing up. The guy says, Dave, and he was a prominent person, and he's supposed to know. He says, I might get a 3rd cutting or a 4th cutting this year because grass, but it's late in the year. It's like August or something. Nobody has ever tried baling hay this late in the season. And I said, well, we did it in Colorado a lot. We'd get snow and you had to wait until it dried off, you know, and you wait until the hay. He says, no, nobody has ever tried it here. I said, oh, now I understand. I didn't realize that chemical reactions and laws of physics were different here. So he proceeded to bale 40 acres ahead. Cut it, windrowed it, baled it in a round bale, stacked it. Think how much fuel, $4 a gallon, he used. Because he would not even accept the fact that somewhere else in the world it's been tried before. It hasn't been tried here. And then 3 days later, I watched the steam come out, you know, and then he had to go down there, move the bales out so he didn't burn his whole stack down. And that kind of thing, that's what I want to talk about. This guy, he's kind of a famous guy. Everybody thinks he's a bad guy. When you hear about Genghis Khan, he was a barbarian. Well, that's what the Europeans say. You go to Mongolia, he's totally different. Do you realize he is totally illiterate? He had the largest land empire that ever done. He did in 40 years what the Romans couldn't do. in 400. Okay. He took the bell makers from Europe. He got to the edge of Europe and he looked over and he took the bell makers and he took the firework makers out of China, put them together, and they made the cannon. The Chinese claim that they made the cannon. Well, actually they did, because Genghis was ruling China at the time. So the Chinese take credit for it. Football blitz. How many people follow football? I knew there'd be a couple of them in there. The blitz. That's a Mongol military strategy. The Germans kind of get credit for it. But actually, the Germans went to Mongolia to learn their tactics before World War II. They took things from other places. That's what I wanted to harp on this time. Robert Fulton, he was right around here, wasn't he? He grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania, I think. I thought he invented the steam engine for the railroad. I looked it up. He didn't. He invented the steamboat, right? The steam engine was already built. Somebody went to Europe. This William Henry, he went to Europe. They saw the steam engines. They were stationary. They were sitting outside of factories, and that was the power. Somebody else came along and put it on the side and made an engine out of it and went down the track. It says most of your ideas come from somewhere else, and that's that whole issue of where you heading, where you going. Okay. For General McClellan, you guys know him? How many people ride horses? A couple of them. You know what a McClellan saddle is, don't you? You do? No, maybe you don't. It was a military saddle. It was used in the Civil War quite a bit, about that era, but they still had cavalry. Mostly on the north, but some of it to the south. He never made it pretty famous outside of the saddle. He had hemorrhoids, and he was always on morphine, so he really didn't make it as a general. But the McClellan saddle was a big deal for him. Okay, he went to Hungary, the Huns, like the Attila Hun and stuff. He went over there and studied their military tactics. This, if I can use this technology without going backwards, that's a McClellan saddle. They're pretty famous. They're around all the time. If you ever go see Civil War stuff, McClellan saddle. It came in a lot of different shapes. This is a Mongolian saddle, which is very similar to the Turks and stuff, same era. Pretty much the same, aren't they? He gets all the credit for making the saddle, but he actually went somewhere else and took it. Took a different idea from somewhere else and adapted it. I'm a little bit ahead of myself. Okay, that's the largest statue in the world, too. It's Genghis Khan out in the middle of nowhere in Mongolia. So how do you know which ideas are good and which ideas are not? Okay, because not every idea will fit into your project, into your way you work. Some will be suited for it and some won't. Well, you ever get the idea that you might be right on the edge of getting something, but you're not quite there? It says, you take an idea from somewhere else, and you've got a pretty good idea there, but it's not going to do real good in a windstorm or anything, and I sure don't want to be driving alongside him on the left when he wants to turn, because there's a driver right there, and you can't see real good. So, but now this guy, he saw a tractor cab over somewhere, didn't he? He saw a shade roof. The more I got to look at this picture, the better I got it. He's got a canopy. He doesn't have to bend over. He must have had a bad back, so he just sets his wagging tongue on his cross. And look at those feet. He's got shoes on them. Those are leather shoes. He might have designed bathing suits after that. But, he saw something from somewhere else and he adapted it to what he had to say. Paradigm shifts. I'm probably talking faster. I might run out of things, so I'll have to start telling jokes. Paradigm shifts. Everybody, do you know what the word is? Nobody put their hand up if they don't. Paradigm shift. A paradigm is the way of thinking. Okay? This is one of the only things I learned, the best thing I learned when I started working for Natural Resource Conservation Service. My entire career has been going from one defunded subject to the next. So I've been ahead of this curve. all along. And I've done real well through it. I've taken advantage of this shift. It was one of the things. This is when everything goes back to normal. Right now with NRCS, we're going through a shift. Okay, I think we are. I could be wrong. But we're pushing for soil health. I was pushing it for grazing because I'm the grazing land specialist for the state. And we don't get much funding. Everything goes to the cropland because if you plant grass on it, we don't get any soil erosion. So why do we need to address it? It says because there's all kinds of people out there. And they said, with this soil health, so I'm pushing. There's an area of New York up along Lake Champlain in Vermont that's all grazing for the most part. It's too cold. You guys talk about grazing year round, you know. It's like, yeah, we got 180 days to feed. Right? This is great down here. I brought my bathing suit because lay out in the sun down here and everything. It's nice down here. They put all the money into crops. I said, folks, there's no crops up there. We need to put it into grazing. He says, but if we plant grass, we won't lose any soil. He says, this is soil health. This is not soil erosion. He says, how good is the soil that we save? And that generation's got to pass on before we really get into it. How many of you guys have ever heard this said? It was good enough for my parents. Usually, you know, I'm NRCS, so I have to really be gender specific. Good enough for my dad. It's good enough for me. Anybody hear that? Anybody say that? Yeah, you don't want to admit. It comes in different ways. It comes in. It comes in and, yeah, that's a great idea, folks. But we don't do that around here. Okay, that's another one, right? I was in the martial arts. I was going to be a prize fighter when I was young. I was studying and studying. You know, martial arts is a study of war and self-defense and stuff like that. They get up and they say, oh, good technique, but that's not our style. Somebody's going to mug you. I'm worried about my style. Just think about it. Paradigm shifts are to break those concepts, break that idea. You know, some of them, you see the guys that are in your community, they're trying something new. Some of them you think, well, maybe they need to go be institutionalized. Others that are right on the verge of things, you know. So you got to know the difference of which ones is it. I'm going to take this head on, folks, because everybody skirts the issue of, you know, it was good enough for my dad, it's good enough for me. This is what the beef industry looked like in 1960. This is the champion steer in Colorado State, 1960. That's what it looks like. Don't be looking at her. Look at this. That's what the champion steer, I think this was Indiana or something, 2010. That's 50 years difference. There's a little difference there in there. You guys can see that, can't you? So do you still want to think about, it was good enough for my dad, it's good enough for me? This is the grand champion. You can't see this. This one's even better. This is the grand champion steer. San Antonio Livestock Expedition, San Antonio, Texas, 1960. Right? We were corn-based, weren't we? These were going into the feedlot. That's a little different than this one. So if you're still doing it the way your folks were doing it, you know, you got to move with the times. You got to be on top. And besides that, folks, for your parents and your grandparents to stay in business, they had to be on the cutting edge. They expected you not to do it the same way they did physically. They want you to do it the same way thinking-wise, to be progressive. Isn't that right? Sometimes, though, it takes a little bit to convince them. When I went to school in the 70s in Colorado State. I was a slow learner. It took me 8 years to get my bachelor's degree because I was packing horses and hunting camps through fall, and I was cowboying through the summer. I didn't have much to do in the spring, so I went to school. One of the things they taught us back then was how many people are from ranches that you got to have the dad or the granddad pass on before you can adopt these new ideas. You know, he's the one in the pickup truck driving down the road, you know. So there's a little bit of politicking and convincing into doing that. So which ones do you talk about, and which ones are good ideas and which ones are not? These are great pictures, aren't they? Well, I got a good way to do that. I thought it up not too long ago. And it's not really an NRCS way, but it works. You get your neighbors to do it. Okay? You convince them into doing it. If you don't want to do it, talk your neighbor into doing it. Give them suggestions. How are you doing on it? Talk about coffees. What can you do? You know, buy them a cup of coffee. Ask them, how's it going? Drive down the road, check it out. Because the person that tries something typically is not the person that makes the money at it. And it's not profitable. The inventor, he invents it, but it's like that steam engine, right? They invented the steam engine. It took somebody else to put it on the wheels and go down the track. Okay, you look at most of your inventions and most of your ideas, somebody else had the raw materials of it, how they do it different. So if you don't want to do it that way, or you like your neighbors, there's two things that you can do. In NRCS, the whole concept of how NRCS, everybody knows what NRCS, SCS, pretty sure most of it's a district and, district-based and stuff. We have all these different incentive payments, right? We used to call them cost share, we call them all kinds of different things, and they're based on trying a new idea. No-till, I was in Washington State. No-till came out. Washington State on the dryland side, everybody thinks it rains in Washington. It rains on one side of the mountains. I was in probably the driest desert in the country. We got 4 inches of precip in the summertime in the driest part of the county. The county was 150 miles north to south. The wet area of the county got 12 inches. Dry area got 4. That means we did not have overland flow. That means some years it did not rain. And they were growing wheat. Okay, dryland wheat. We had summer fallow. That's a new concept. It took 2 years to grow a crop. You had 1 year you had to save all the moisture. They actually set a hard pan and fluffed up the soil. And the second year they grew a crop. During the drought, they were getting 8 bushel to the acre, which wasn't real good. So anyway, we were pushing no-till. You're going to get a reduction in production when you try something new, right? Because the big thing was, and no-till drills hadn't come out real good. They hadn't perfected it. They're still going through the idea. And then so the seed-to-soil contact was low and all that litter and stuff. So we were paying people to try it. And so that was taking place of your neighbor, you know, that you didn't want to buy the coffee for. We cost share on that part. That way you can try an idea. How many times I hear it over and over, says, boy, that was a great program. Says, how come you discontinued it? Says, we don't have to because now it's within the group. You know, people are trying it, they've perfected, we pay for it in the beginning to get the thing started. Once it's up and going, everything's fine and you don't have to pay for it anymore. So that's how that works. I don't know how it's going to work in the future because I don't even know if I'm working today. I got to check my emails. This is the way the way the government's working and stuff like that. Everybody's cutting back. And some of that stuff we cut back, like GLCI, Grazing Land Initiative. I don't know how it's in this state, but New York, it's not funded. So there's another paradigm shift for me. You guys need somebody down here to help out? The other thing that's coming up, and you see this quite a bit, you hear about it, they're called the SIG grants. Okay, they are conservation innovative grants. They are the ones that are paying you again to try something new. Okay, once it's already up and going, we don't pay for it anymore. We don't have to. You know, every project, look at the trip to the moon. Some of you guys know about that. says, look at all the benefits that came out of that. They had people trying different things, and then they finally came out and they applied them to everything. That's what these guys are doing. Some of them you think are a little bit bizarre. Usually, if I say something's not going to work, invest in it, because my whole career is, oh, that'll never work. That's the worst thing. You know what it is? And then the next thing it works. So I know that about myself. And I ran a little short. I probably talked fast, but that's me. If you need to get a hold of me for some reason, I'm on this side. Those are Mongol racehorses, just in case you wanted to know them. I got a little time to tell you a little bit about Mongolia. They got different races. You ever been to the Kentucky Derby or Preakness or anything like that? They do a pretty good job. Mongolians are a little different in their racing. It's like a 20, 30-mile race, and they run it, right? And I'm going back because I want to learn how they condition their horses. There's a whole way that they get them fat, hard fat and everything. They stick some kid on there bareback, and they run for 20 miles. Everybody else they're doing their wrestling and their archery, and they do considerable amount of drinking. Anywhere you go that's cold, people drink. They come back, and the first horse across the race finish line wins. The rider does not have to be present because they're racing horses. They're not racing riders. So it's great. And so this guy was a pretty famous horse trainer. He didn't speak English, so I didn't get to know much about him. But anyway, that's all I got. This is our disability. If you feel that we have discriminated against you in any main fashion, and, it's an and, you are part of one of these groups, you have the right. If you're not, anyway, so that's all I got. I thought it would take a little bit longer, but I guess it didn't. Any questions? Anybody want to beat me up? Yeah. Just stretching your arm? Yeah. Okay. So, hope you enjoyed it. Just a different way to think about things. Some things are good, some things aren't. Try it. If it works, great. If not, get your neighbor to do it next time.
Any questions for Mr. Roberts?
Good. Thank you.
That's on behalf of the
Okay.
committee.
Well, good deal. Appreciate it.